We gotta talk about the Zack Snyder Cut.
Who's scruffy looking?
This is not something that I'm totally down for. I'm going to get to that in a second, but if you live under a rock and you don't know what the Zack Snyder Cut is, basically it's a cut of the Justice League film from the DC Cinematic Universe that never got to see the light of day. Zack Snyder pretty much finished 80% of the film before he had to step down due to some, personal reasons, and he never got to finish the film. Well, now he gets to finish his film, and it will be coming out sometime next year. I don't know all the details. So it's a pretty big deal. Not to mention, it's an alternate cut of a movie that's already been out since 2017. Just so you know, I don't care about the DC Cinematic Universe.
Don't care. Don't care.
At all. Don't care.
I don't care. I don't.
However, I do care about the Star Wars universe. So I wanted to take a moment to relate the Zack Snyder Cut into something that could probably happen for Star Wars. This whole Snyder Cut sort of continues this precedent online of hashtag it and mention it to death, and eventually it will happen. It's already happened in the Star Wars universe to an extent. It happened with the Clone Wars Season 7. Everywhere you went, on YouTube, on Twitter, online, everywhere, you saw Save the Clone Wars, Save the Clone Wars, Save the Clone Wars for years and years and years. And eventually, they did save the Clone Wars. And I'm happy they did. You also saw it with the Kenobi show. That's going to happen sometime next year, 2 years from now? I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. But it's going to happen. Fans really wanted to see Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So they just mentioned it to death online. And it happened. The same thing's happening with the Snyder Cut. They just mentioned it to death, and they mentioned it, and they mentioned it, and now it's going to happen. There's also something to be said for the fact that they're making an alternate draft to a movie that's been out since 2017 to a franchise where canon does matter to a very large fan base. There are fans in Star Wars that can't get their head around canon today. You have your staunch EU supporters, you have some people that mix the two, you have some people that are strictly Disney, and that's okay because you can believe whatever you want about a cinematic universe that's made up. But when you change the cut of a film, that's when it starts pushing the boundaries for me. There were old comics in the EU called Star Wars Infinities or something like that changed the movies, and they weren't considered canon. They were just alternate timelines. But the scenarios were so bombastic and outlandish that it really didn't matter. They were just very clearly not canon. But if you make an alternate cut of a film that the scenarios could realistically work out for the characters in an organic manner, now you're starting to really split some hairs, and in an already divided fan base, you're going to divide it even more. So what does this all mean for Star Wars? Does the Zack Snyder Cut have an impact on Lucasfilm and Disney's handling of the Star Wars franchise? Realistically, no. Because if Disney starts taking direction from the DC Cinematic Universe, we're in some deep trouble. However, I wanted to make this video just as a what-if scenario. What if Star Wars did get the Zack Snyder treatment? What movie would fit the Zack Snyder treatment the best? What movie in the entire Star Wars cinematic universe could we have an alternate cut to and fit into the timeline? What movie was almost finished but didn't quite get there and changed at the 11th hour? Let's check it out. In my mind, there's only a few Star Wars movies that I think would be eligible for the Zack Snyder treatment. The first one everyone is probably guessing right now is the Colin Trevarrow version of the Rise of Skywalker, otherwise known as the Duel of Fates. Unfortunately, this doesn't quite meet all the boxes for the Zack Snyder treatment. First of all, the movie was never shot. It's a script and some concept art. That's the extent of the movie. Whereas the Zack Snyder Cut is essentially a full movie very close to completion. So advocating for an alternate version of the Rise of Skywalker just isn't going to happen because it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars just to make. Also, the Rise of Skywalker was a fine movie as is. I think the second movie that would seemingly be eligible would be the rumored 4-hour Revenge of the Sith long cut. There's been this rumor going around for a while now that Revenge of the Sith was originally a 4-hour movie, and there are things that have never been seen because even with all the deleted scenes, it doesn't add up to 4 hours. However, the reason Revenge of the Sith doesn't get a Zack Snyder treatment is because A, it's only a rumor and there's no concrete evidence that a cut like this even exists. Maybe the one of the first drafts resembles a 4-hour movie, but that's why it's a first draft. And B, George Lucas wasn't forced out of his job like Snyder. George had enough of Star Wars, he told his stories, and decided it was time to go. So he can't come back to redo a 15-year-old movie, nor would the actors look much the same. So that leaves one. The one movie I think would be the most likely to get a Zack Snyder treatment. Rogue One. The pre-reshoot cut, or as a subscriber of mine said, the uncut cut. If you followed the production of Rogue One before it came out, you know that they went through extensive reshoots for this movie. Reshoots are pretty normal for all movies to change things and to touch up scenes, but Rogue Ones were so massive that they hired another director to help Gareth Edwards. I remember hearing that the original ending was way too dark, which is sort of surprising because Rogue One is a pretty dark movie as is. There's also footage in the trailers of stuff that was never seen in the movie. There's a scene with Jyn and Cassian running on the beach with the Death Star plans. There's a few shots of Vader in front of the screen or something. And there's some shots of Krennic walking pretty ominously across the beach, and a few others. So clearly there is a cut of this movie that was assembled and cleared for trailers, but was then changed in reshoots at the 11th hour. Another thing that adds fuel to this fire is there's never been any deleted scenes released from Rogue One. Not in the Blu-ray, and not even on Disney+. I honestly have no idea how this original cut could have went. Honestly, it couldn't have been too much different, because if it was darker than the one that premiered and everyone died in that one, then who else would have died? We also got that Vader scene. It doesn't get much darker than that. And the rebels still have to steal the Death Star plan, so obviously that still happens. I honestly have no idea how it could have been much different. If you know how it could have changed, please let me know down in the comments, because I have no clue. So here's the pitch. I don't want the alternative cut, because actually Rogue One is amazing as is. Rogue One's a masterpiece. It's beautiful. But I love it so much that I do kind of want to see the original third act. I need Disney to release the original pre-reshoot third act. Not canon, not interfering with anything, just bring me that first cut of the third act in like a deleted scene. That's all. Alright, let me reiterate real quick. I think the Zack Snyder cut is kinda meh. I don't really care.
I don't care.
I'm happy for him, but when it comes to Star Wars, first of all, I don't think they should be taking direction from the DC cinematic universe. And I don't like alternative cuts to movies that have already come out. Because A, just give me new stuff. And B, if they brought in a whole other director and changed the whole third act of Rogue One, it must have been really, really bad. These guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. Okay guys, until next time, I'll see you later.